Matt, welcome to CFO at Home. Thanks for your time today.
Man, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here on your show. I'm excited for this.
I'm excited for it as well. I was telling you a bit earlier before we hit record that funny thing about a personal finance podcast is we have a tendency to hit the same subjects over and over again, which is great because you have to deliver messages in different ways to resonate with different people. Sometimes you'll hear something, particularly in the area of personal finance, you'll hear somebody's story about how they got out of debt, or you'll hear about some type of process or something, and it resonate with you in one way, but it doesn't quite spur you to action. And then you'll hear something else, same subject, but somehow it hits in a way that spurs action. And you have a
Mhm.
personal story that I was particularly interested in getting into because you are in the finance management profession now, but you started out as a professional baseball player. And I just like to hear about that story and how that led, because that's an interesting transition from pro baseball player to working in financial management. Hear a little bit about that story, how you made the transition.
Sure. My whole life, starting from age 6, when I wrote in my preschool graduation yearbook, which we had one, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be a baseball player. And that was a real thing. In my heart, I really could see myself there. I wasn't alone at 6 years old. There's other baseball and basketball and astronauts and veterinarians, firefighters. There was a lot of that. But I chased that dream realistically for the next 20 years. And as I got older and I realized there was a chance, there was all kinds of adversity and things that I had to face, people telling me that I should probably be more realistic and all kinds of odds that were heavily stacked against me outside of the statistical odds. But that's something that I carry with me now my entire life. As you think of somebody who's got a point zero whatever percent chance of making it. I don't know the actual number. I just know it's a really low percentage of baseball players or people who actually become professional athletes. I obviously wasn't trying to conform to the average or to the norm. And that has been, I guess, my that's my wiring, that's my motto, that's my lifeblood, I guess, my entire life. If you look at my body of work so far, my who I am, chase the dream to be a professional athlete, married and for 14 years, have 7 children. We homeschool them, started a business at 40 years old with 7 kids. Like, I'm really not a poster child for conformity. I chased that dream, lived it, and never made it to the big leagues. I played in the minor leagues with the Royals for 5 seasons. But when that was done, it really became like I was recently married and then shortly thereafter got pregnant with our first child. It was like I'm the sole provider with no income. That wasn't a great start to my professional life. So I immediately went to a finance staffing firm to get me work. Really, their job, their whole business model is we will employ people with our clients. You're looking for a job, we have clients looking to hire people, we'll play matchmaker. I felt like I was a perfect fit for that because I needed to be matched. So I went to this finance staffing firm first looking for work. Can you please just match me with somebody? And they ended up hiring me to work for them, which was not the plan. That's not their model, but it was a sales role, and I cut my teeth in sales and learned business, learned sales, learned that in staffing unintentionally. But eventually, in all of the 12 meetings a week, 100 dials a day for 4.5 years, that was that world. I met during one of my 12 meetings per week the former my former bosses, the founders of the old firm I worked for in staffing. I was having a coffee with them. I was hitting my KPIs, one of 12. I had no thought about joining the industry, but we're having a coffee, we're hitting it off. And he said, "Hey, you would be really good in wealth management. Have you ever considered it?" A lot of prayer and a lot of homework on that. One thing led to another. Here I am, nearly a decade into it. And now I launched my own thing a couple years ago, a year and a half ago. So it feels more like a calling than a career at this point. But that's the seemingly disconnected path from pro athlete to wealth management founder at 40.
So, having that childhood interest in sports, what was your interest, or did you have any interest prior to having this opportunity in money, wealth management, any of that type of thing? I'm asking it from the perspective of a certified money nerd, that while you were pursuing your dream of playing professional baseball, I was nerding out on money somewhere.
I'll be honest, I had a lot of fear and reservations around finances. I grew up in a home where my parents were divorced when I was young, and my mom still lived in my childhood home. And I remember a time, for example, this will highlight where my money relationship began. I remember a time in college where I was living in New England at the time, in Boston, the Boston area. So it's cold around Christmas, when I was home for Christmas break, and I got into the house and all the lights were off, which was my upbringing. Turn the lights off, keep the electricity bill down. But it was always cool in my house, pretty cold. Like, we didn't put the heat above 64. But I remember walking into the house, and there was blankets draped into the living room. So like, down a hallway around the corner was a living room. Blankets were draped in the doorway, heavy blankets. And I peered around them and I was saying, "Hey, mom, what are we doing in here? What's up with the blankets?" And I noticed in that moment, when I pulled the blanket back, it was noticeably warmer in the home, I mean, in the room, excuse me, that she was in. And I realized then she was effectively cocooning herself in this room to save on heat costs, because oil heat is really expensive. And that was my upbringing in a nutshell. Being a pro athlete, even though it sounds amazing, in the minor leagues, I made $600 every 2 weeks was my first paycheck. And 500 of that once a month went toward my hotel stay where I was living. So I needed to learn how to squeeze a quarter out of every nickel I earned. I grew up with a mom who taught me scarcity, worry, lack around finances. And I continued that as I continued to earn four figures a year playing pro baseball. I didn't even make it to five figures until eventually I got into the world of finance. I was really thrust into the language of money because, in that story where I was asked, "Would you want to join the wealth management world?" Everything leading up to that point in my money relationship was fear, worry, scared of it, didn't understand it. And now I'm asked to be in that world. So I learned the language of money not until I was probably in my 30s, really was when I joined that, early 30s. I joined the industry, and I describe it like this: if you studied a little Spanish and then moved to Spain, you would learn Spanish quickly. I quickly, like, I learned a little bit of personal finance, and then I was my career became educating people on how to use their money effectively. I learned the game of money, the language of money, pretty quickly.
And all of this is happening while at home you're married, you're starting a family, you're averaging, I'm no math major, but if that's, I believe it says 7 kids over 14 years, that's like a kid every other year. So
Yeah,
you,
good.
you,
It's good. That's exactly it.
you are launching a whole nother project in your personal life, which, needless to say, is also involves personal finance, starting personal finance habits and that type of thing. So I'm curious, how did this learning, because you moved to Spain, so to speak, this
Yeah.
learning of the world of personal finance, how did that manifest itself at home? How did that translate at home? You describe your background with money. I imagine your wife brings another perspective into the marriage. How
Yep.
did all that mesh together?
It opened my eyes to a whole different world of money that I didn't understand. I didn't even know existed. I take that back. I knew conceptually it existed. I played with guys who signed multi seven figure contracts, eight-figure contracts. I drove into the spring training parking lot where it was very evident whose car was the minor league cars and whose car was the first rounders and the big leaguers, right? It was very clear. Lots of Escalades with a lot of aftermarket work. So I understood money was out there. I understood that you could earn it. I didn't really know how. I didn't really understand, like, the language of finance, the different instruments that you could use that could help you. if you needed money, access to capital in different ways. So as I got into the world, I all of a sudden understood, okay, this is more than just like work hard, spend hours working, and then you trade that time for money. I learned that money is really more of an exchange of value than it is a result of hard work and time spent. And what I would describe that, how I would describe that, and how I describe it to my kids is, if money, excuse me, let me say that again. If you were to say the richest people in the world are the hardest working people in the world, then there should be a whole boatload of multimillionaire roofers and laborers. And it just doesn't work that way, not because they don't work hard, but because money doesn't reward, excuse me, you aren't rewarded financially by working hard alone. The value exchange, like what you are able to do for somebody, is really how you're paid. And I learned that in the language of money. And as I learned the language of money, as I'm in that world, and I tell my kids to simplify it for them in a way that they understand, because if they fundamentally understand this concept, then they can go after, in a healthy way, they can go after earning income in ways that they feel are fulfilling to them and are serving people. I tell them, look, if there's somebody in the in the yard, excuse me, in the neighborhood who needs their yard mowed, that's going to cost them some amount of their time, an hour or 2 hours, however long it is. Certain people enjoy doing it, so it doesn't matter how much time it is. That's a beautiful thing for them. So you're not going to earn their business. No matter how cheap you say you can do it, they're going to say, no, it's not worth it to me. That value exchange isn't there. I love to mow the lawn. I don't want to pay you to do it because for me it fills my cup. But there's going to be plenty of other people out there that say, I can't stand mowing my lawn, and I would buy back those 2 hours it takes me in a heartbeat, so long as the amount that I'm going to pay is worth it to me. Worth it being like, maybe I make $100,000 in my professional life. Quick math says that's roughly $50 an hour. That mowing the lawn is $100 of my time. If you can go in there, to my kids who are 13 and under, if you can go in there and say, I'll mow your whole lawn for $20, that person's going to say, holy smokes. A, I don't have to do the thing that I don't want to do. B, I just bought $100 worth of my time back for 20. That's a great exchange of value. I'll do that all day. And as you start to think of the money that way, you're no longer chasing dollars. You're just figuring out how you are uniquely qualified to serve people in a way that they feel like they got the value out of the deal too. So that's how it impacted me personally, because I started to see earning income in a whole new world. Never mind the investing part, where it's like once the money comes in the door, it becomes your employee. Like it's now your worker. You worked hard to earn it. Now you should go assign your money jobs to go do things. That was a whole nother different concept for me. And thank God my wife just believes in me and trusts me, because I'm sharing all this stuff with her, and as I'm downloading it early in my career, and she's looking at me like, "Huh, I don't, I've never heard it like that. That's pretty cool. I never, yeah, okay, I never thought." She's just appeasing me, but it's settling in with her too. She gets it, and it's just been a really long-winded answer, but a really freeing experience, because as I've understood the rules of the game, it's freed me up to be a little more present at home and with my wife and with my children, because I used to have this worry in the back of my mind around finances and earning enough, and will it be, will am I doing the right thing? Will I be able to afford groceries and bills, and if I have another child, what happens? Now I understand the rules a little more, and I understand the value exchange. Now it's just about coming up with a plan to be able to go and do what needs to get done, to earn what needs to get done, and invest what needs to be invested in. I'll stop the answer there, but it's really dramatically shifted my home life.
And it was such a great answer. I was just enjoying it. Not a problem. Not a problem there. Yeah. One of the things that you did, a phrase that you repeated a few times when you were providing your answer there, is understand the rules of the game. That one resonated with me. And it reminds me of, I am in the latter stages of a 30 some odd year corporate career. In the early stages, my first couple of years, I was pretty intimidated because, wow, these guys are making these big decisions, and I'm going to be surrounded by all these uber intelligent people doing all these uber intelligent things. You get on the other side of that and realize people are intelligent, but there are very few people who are like launching rockets here. It's just people who are working hard, of average or above intelligence. The and the fact that whole thing was demystified for me just came as a great relief. And it sounds like, as far as your journey, something similar has happened. Probably, though, even on a more basic level, because what was being demystified for you is not just how a profession worked, but also how money works, which is something that a lot of us spend our lifetimes trying to figure out. And you come from a pretty humble background. In learning that, what were some of the things that surprised you the most? I imagine that you had some preconceived notions coming into that about money and about wealth building and about what it took to be successful. Are there particular preconceptions that you went, oh, wow, it didn't work like that, it works like this?
I love that word demystify. That is powerful. I couldn't agree more with you. Yes, there were a couple, I would say, realizations that I really didn't anticipate, didn't expect. The first big one is that this world of high finance that I'm in, personal finance, you don't need to grow up with parents who have been stockbrokers their whole life, have a pedigree and a family history of being in the industry, and then you attend school for economics or finances of some kind. You really don't need that type of background, which is what I thought you needed. You don't need that background to understand how money works. And I use the language game of money because as an athlete, it just speaks to me, but you could say rules of money or the language of money, whatever works for your background. For me, as an athlete, the rules of the game make sense. So the game of money, I was shocked that in high finance, which is, I'm using air quotes, in high finance as a financial advisor, I thought those people, I guess I personally propped those people up on some kind of pedestal because they must have known something I didn't know. When here's the truth, they're often doing whatever their team or their computer is telling them to do in terms of investing. So there wasn't really this like incredible strategy necessarily that was operating behind the scenes. And the second piece was that they didn't necessarily position themselves in a healthy way. I learned as I got into the world, meaning every advisor I had talked to kind of positioned themselves as the hero of somebody's story, saying, if you don't work with me, you probably will fail. And I realized as I learned the rules of the game, I'm like, anybody can understand this. I'm I am in a lot of ways I'm very dispensable in terms of just telling you how it works. I used to think I needed an advisor, otherwise my financial life was going to fail. And now I realize a lot of these people are speaking over your head as a potential client or as a potential customer in a way to justify their existence because the reality is anybody can learn this stuff. And I don't want to speak bad about the industry. What I'm trying to get across here as a point is that you can learn this stuff, and the education of finance, the education of how it works, has been one of two things that has most dramatically impacted and changed my relationship with money. And if anybody is struggling in this day and age, here's how I would encourage you to just get started. You don't even have to talk to a person at this point. You can use ChatGPT or AI of some kind, and you could literally say, I don't know anything about personal finance. And you don't have to be embarrassed because it's you're typing to a computer. You're not even speaking to a human to admit that. I don't know anything about personal finance. Speak to me as a novice. Tell me the first 5 questions I should be researching on this journey of financial understanding. Something like that. That's the prompt. See what it spits out for questions. Now ask chat to answer those questions for you. And you are well on your way to getting to have a wonderfully healthy financial life. I think an advisor needs to position themselves as the guide along someone's financial journey, but they are the heroes of their story. I'm here to guide you, to talk to you about things that maybe emotionally ChatGPT can't, to invest in ways that you wouldn't be able to do it on your own with access to information you couldn't have on your own. Sure, there's value in that. But for me, and this is the realization, is for an advisor to position themselves this day and age as the hero of your financial story is a first off, it's a lie, but second off, it's a really risky and scary place to position because we live in the age of information.
Yeah, another thing we talk a lot about on this podcast, or at least a question that I bring up to a lot of guests, is the whole premise of CFO at home is pointed towards that person in a household who is really taking the lead in terms of managing the finances. Certainly not a lone voice, but that
Yep.
person who takes the lead. And part of the question is that comes up around that is how knowledgeable does that person need to be, particularly in a world where you do interface with financial professionals. There are financial professionals out there that range from financial coaches who will help you to get out of debt and kind of get your feet on the ground to investment advisors and all points in between. If you are going to interface with those type of people, where's the line? How much should I try to do myself versus when do I engage a professional? If I engage a professional, then how knowledgeable do I have to be? So what you're talking about overlaps with that conversation, or actually it is that conversation. And what I'm taking out of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if I am interfacing or I'm deciding that, hey, I need to get my finances in order and I don't know anything about this money thing intimidates me and I'm not good at math, the obstacles that people deal with. One, if I'm following your steps correctly, self-educate. There are a lot of self-education ways. We talked about books in the early part of this podcast. Now you could just go to Chat GPT or
Mm.
to AI to get that fundamental understanding and that fundamental education. But then I can imagine that there is a point that you're still going to want to or feel the need to interface with a financial professional, but you're not just opening up the book and saying, "Oh, help me. I'm going to do anything you tell me. I'm just a person who's not good at money." You're coming in with from a perspective of at least some knowledge, which I would think would make you more discerning, even in terms of choosing that advisor, as opposed to just choosing the advisor that your uncle said is good and going, "Okay, guy, you're good at money. Here's all my money. You go for it."
Yeah, what you're saying is what I agree with. I have the benefit and the good fortune of having had thousands of conversations with people about their money. And the overwhelming majority of people will spend more time researching a $50 Amazon purchase, reading reviews, checking the stars, than they will on making the decision who is going to manage their entire life savings. I'm not lying. That's just the reality. They will review Amazon for about 20, 30 minutes to make sure they're not getting screwed and the product is what it says it is. But they will take blind trust from your uncle or whomever and say, I like this person. They're trustworthy. I'm going to give them my entire life's work. And to that, I often say, would you ever give your money to somebody you don't trust? It's obvious, no, I'm not going to do that. So my argument is let's just take trust off the table as as the reason you made the decision because that's a given. Why else did you make the decision? I like them. But let's take that off the table because would you give your money to somebody you didn't like? No, probably not. Okay. And eventually what ends up happening is you find out people were embarrassed and worried that they would look stupid So they just borrowed their friends, their uncles, their whomever's trust in that person. I would challenge people to say, answer your question earlier, how much do you need to know? You need to know enough to understand the rules of the game. But it's probably time to find somebody when you feel overwhelmed by the complexity of your financial life and you're nervous and don't want to make those decisions yourself for whatever reason. It's taking too much time, it's occupying too much headspace. You have an understanding of how it works, but not intimately enough to feel confident in the decisions you're making. There's a number of reasons why you want to then go find somebody who lives and breathes the world of finance like I do. But you do need to understand at first that if you're going to be the hero of your story, you've got to understand how this works, at least a high level. And that you can use chat and you can use the internet and you can use, there's too much information actually out there. It's discerning what's the right stuff is probably at this point more of a challenge once you go down that rabbit hole. But I would say nobody should make a decision on trust alone or likability alone. I would also say, and I've learned this just through the people who tend to gravitate to me to them, you probably want to see a reflection of yourself in some way, shape, or form across the table from the advisor that you may hire. And that doesn't mean the advisor should look like you. What that means is that person should probably share worldviews, morals, ethics. Maybe they're down a path that you want to go down, or they have walked and are walking a path that you have walked. There's a familiarity and an understanding of who you are, how you're wired, what your life is like, so that when you come to them with, I'll use an example in my world, I work with a lot of athletes, entrepreneurial people who have challenged status quo, who have made the bold claim to say, I'm going to pursue an extraordinary life. And by definition, an extraordinary life means you're doing something extra than ordinary, like above and beyond. You can't have ordinary advice given to you if you're pursuing an extraordinary life. So if your entire, like mine, your entire body of work is unconventional, then it doesn't make sense logically to go find conventional advice to get you to where you're trying to get to. So maybe an advisor like me is a great fit for an entrepreneur or somebody like that. Whereas if I was sitting across, actually, I did in my first year of this, I sat across from a whole lot of CFOs because that was my previous network when I was in finance staffing. Those are the people that were my clients. CFOs, hiring managers, and corporate finance was a lot of my network. And I started to share with them like my new passion, my new career path, what I'm doing. And I could see the eyes glaze over. I learned talking about the corporate budget was a very different conversation than talking about their pockets. And the reason was I didn't grow up in accounting. I didn't grow up in financial planning and analysis on a corporate side. I didn't spend 30 years incrementally going from staff accountant to senior accountant to assistant controller to, and I didn't walk their path. The only thing we had in common was they liked baseball, I liked baseball, but they didn't play sports. They just enjoyed it. We walked two different lives. And when it became time to talk about their finances, they needed and wanted somebody who, like I said, reflected them in some way, shape, or form. And I just didn't. So I wasn't a great fit for them. So if you're going to hire somebody, I think that's probably a couple great pieces of, a couple great variables to consider when you're doing that.
Yeah, that is so true. Because even in my life, as I look to work with a financial professional, which is not the easiest thing for me to do, to be honest, because I've been DIYing my entire financial life for my entire life. And I'm still struggling with that a little bit. But the person that I have the most rapport with, you would see the two of us and you wouldn't think that there was a common link. I'm a black guy in his early 60s. This guy's probably in his 40s. He's a white guy. You wouldn't look at the two of us and go, now those two are going to work well together.
Yep. Yep.
But he's in his firm, they're an expert at not only working with people in a corporate environment, but they have studied my particular corporate environment. So they know our benefits. They know how we operate better than our own HR people. So that set up something that resonated in terms of how we're looking at this thing. And
Mhm.
also there was a personality match there that's very important, and trust has built up over all those things. So even though you'd look at us and go, yeah, I wouldn't pair those two up, when you really look at the things that matter in life, it absolutely works. And there has to be a comfort there, whether you're handing over a portion of your financial life, even if you're just opening the door to advice from a person.
Yep.
There has to be a certain level of trust there. So that's an excellent point. Matt, really appreciated the time with you today. I want to give you just a minute to tell the folks about Reconstructing Wealth. You can be found at reconstructingwealth.com on the internet. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing there.
Sure. It is a registered investment advisory firm. RIA is the industry term. It basically means an independent financial advisory firm. We are a fee only firm, so we don't accept commissions of any kind, which kind of it eliminates the question mark of is this guy investing in this stuff because it's padding his pockets or it's helping me? Because we can't get paid a commission. So you can rest assured knowing that we have to operate with your interests first. But that's the type of firm we are. We are investing on people's behalf. We are making financial plans. The investment strategy is actually pretty fun. We invest in individual stocks, so we don't, like most advisors will take your investments or your money, excuse me, and then go put it in a handful of funds from of which there are different fund managers around the country managing those funds. We actually don't we aren't the middleman. We are the ones that say, okay, we'll take your money and we will invest it in this individual stock strategy we have. It's modeled after a guy named David Malik. He wrote a book, Dancing with the Analysts. And in that book, it will tell you the exact investment strategy. If any of your listeners want a copy of that book to learn the strategy, I will mail it to them because it got mailed to me and it was the reason I joined the industry. I'm not saying that your listeners will have that same dramatic life inflection point like career shift, but it's an understanding and education. In my world, like working out, there are a lot of different ways to work out, and all of them work depending on what you're trying to accomplish. This is one way to invest, and it works depending on what you're trying to accomplish. That's how I would describe it. But that's who we are. The term reconstructing wealth is really at the heart of the mission. It's not why people come to me. They come to me because they need investment help, they need financial plans, they got goals and all the things that they need to accomplish, and we got to get them there. My heart and my mission is to reconstruct somebody's relationship with money because I've learned as I learned the rules of the game, and we didn't talk about it, but as I started to give a little more away, loosened my grip on finances, my entire life has changed. My relationship with it has changed, and as a result, my life has changed. And forever, future Maurizios, like generations to come, I've been the one to break those chains of scarcity and worry and fear around finances. And I like to believe that I've taught my kids and will continue to teach them in a way that they can stand on my shoulders and do more with finances than I've ever done, and so on. And I actually have a heart to do that in the lives of the clients I work with. They don't come to me for that. The same way people don't go to Jenny Craig to say, I think I emotionally eat when I'm sad. Like they say, I got to lose 20 pounds and 3 inches on my waistline by this wedding date. Like they come to me to say, I got investment issues and I need to work on a plan. But I know that the people who are most successful at Jenny Craig are the ones who learn that food is fuel and understand how it interacts with their body. Same way with money. So the most successful clients have totally changed their relationship with it. And I will die on this cross that I am trying to redefine financial freedom. And this is what I'll leave you with as financial freedom equals somebody who has emotionally detached from their money, not somebody who has enough money to fund their life. Because I've worked with enough people at this point who have plenty of money to fund their life and are not financially free. So if you can emotionally detach from your finances, you have, in my opinion, achieved financial freedom.
See, and now I want to go 6 feet deep on that statement, but thanks. But maybe I'll have you back another time because that
Yeah,
is thought
listen, on that
provoking.
point, I know we talked about this. I created a 3 video course, 3 or 4 videos, 6 to 8 minutes long. If anybody wants it, follow me on Instagram. It's just my name at Matt Maurizio, and send me a DM. I'll send you a link to the course. It costs nothing. It's an email address, but it goes into a lot of that relationship change, also some blocking and tackling on how to's of personal finance. And it will be a great primer for that.
Okay, so in that world of information that you were talking about earlier, that's one way for anyone listening to gain some of that information in a nice, tight, concise package. So that's
Yeah.
great. And again, costs nothing,
Yeah.
just something that you're doing because you really believe in what you're doing. And believe me, as someone who's on that same mission, I know a real one when I talk to them,
Mm,
and you certainly are a part of that club. And Matt,
likewise.
I just want to thank you one more time for the time that you've spent with us, sharing your wisdom, sharing your journey. Thanks for being on CFO at Home today.
Thank you for having me. It's a real honor.